Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. I never imagined that one conversation would shake the foundation of everything I thought I knew. It all started on an ordinary Friday evening. My husband, Mark, had been working late more often than usual, and that night was no exception. He had mentioned that his boss, Richard, wanted to discuss something important with him over dinner, and to my surprise, I was invited along. I had met Richard a handful of times before, always in professional settings. He was a man in his early 60s, confident, well-spoken, and undeniably charismatic. He had that effortless charm that made people gravitate toward him, yet there was always a sense that he was holding something back. I wasn't particularly looking forward to the dinner. Mark's work events tended to be stiff, filled with corporate small talk and forced laughter. But I wanted to be supportive, so I slipped into a sleek navy dress, just formally enough to fit the occasion, but comfortable enough to feel like myself. When we arrived at the restaurant, a high-end place with dim lighting and soft jazz playing in the background, I noticed right away that the table was set for 3, not 4. "Where's your wife?" I asked Richard as we took our seats. His smile faltered for the briefest moment. "Ah, she's out of town visiting her sister," he said casually. "Just the 3 of us tonight." A waiter arrived, pouring a deep red wine into our glasses, and for a while the conversation was exactly what I expected. Work, company changes, the usual. But then, somewhere between the appetizers and the main course, Richard shifted the conversation. "I have to say, Mark," he said, swirling the wine in his glass, "you're an incredibly lucky man." Mark chuckled, looking at me. "I know." Richard's eyes lingered on me a second too long before he spoke again. "A woman like that, graceful, intelligent, and still stunning at 47? That's not something you see every day." I felt my cheeks heat up. The compliment was unexpected, but what struck me more was the way he said it. Slow, deliberate, almost as if he wanted the words to settle in the air between us. Mark, ever the easygoing type, simply laughed. "You're flattering her, Richard." Richard smiled, but there was something unreadable in his expression. "Maybe," he said, taking a sip of wine. "Or maybe I'm just being honest." The conversation moved on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Richard was leading it somewhere specific. His words, his glances, there was an underlying intention behind them. By the time dessert was served, I was on edge, though I couldn't quite explain why. That's when Richard leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "There's something I've been thinking about for a while now," he said. His voice was low, steady. "Something unconventional." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Unconventional?" Richard's gaze flickered to me before returning to Mark. "You know, as we get older, life starts to feel predictable. Routine. And sometimes, breaking that routine, stepping outside of what's expected, can be exhilarating." I shifted in my seat. My stomach tightened, but not from the rich food. There was a weight in the air, something unspoken but thick with implication. Mark frowned slightly. "I'm not sure I follow." Richard exhaled, as if carefully choosing his next words. "I respect you, Mark, and I respect your marriage. But let's just say I've always believed that certain boundaries can be flexible, if the circumstances are right." A silence fell over the table. I felt my pulse quicken. I knew, instinctively, that whatever Richard was about to say next would change the course of the night. Then he looked me right in the eyes and said, "What if, just once, we let those boundaries bend?" The air in my lungs turned solid. My fingers tightened around the stem of my wine glass. I could see Mark processing the words, his expression frozen in something between confusion and shock. And in that moment, all I could think was, what does he expect us to say? A cold wave rushed through my body, despite the warm glow of the restaurant's ambient lighting. My grip on the wine glass tightened as Richard's words settled in the air between us, heavy and impossible to ignore. Mark blinked, his expression shifting from confusion to something more unreadable. "I'm sorry, Richard, but I think I need you to clarify what exactly you mean." Richard leaned back in his chair, a slow, knowing smile forming on his face. He didn't look flustered or embarrassed, as if this kind of conversation was as natural to him as discussing stock market trends. "I meant exactly what I said," he replied, swirling the last of his wine in his glass. A change in perspective, a break from the expected. I felt my stomach twist. Was he really suggesting what I thought he was? I glanced at Mark, hoping he would say something to shut this down, to draw a hard line in the sand, but he just sat there, silent, processing. That silence unsettled me even more than Richard's words. "I'm not sure what you're expecting here," I finally said, my voice measured but firm. Richard exhaled, as if amused. "No expectations, just an idea." His gaze flickered between me and Mark. "You've been married for over 20 years, haven't you?" Mark nodded cautiously. 23. Richard smiled again. "That's a long time. A beautiful thing, really. But long marriages, they evolve, don't they? People change. Needs change. Sometimes keeping a spark alive means stepping outside of what's comfortable." My heart pounded in my chest. My pulse roared in my ears. "So you're saying you think we should shake things up?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Richard tilted his head slightly, his gaze steady. "I'm saying that sometimes sharing something, someone you love, doesn't have to be a loss. It can be an experience." A sharp breath caught in my throat. The insinuation was clear now, no more room for misinterpretation. He was talking about me, about my marriage, about some kind of arrangement, something I had never even considered. I turned to Mark, my eyes searching his face for a reaction, for some kind of rejection, some firm boundary that said we weren't the kind of couple who entertained such things. But instead of anger or disgust, there was something else in his expression. Hesitation. Uncertainty. My stomach clenched. "Mark?" My voice came out softer than I intended, a quiet plea. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling deeply before finally speaking. "Richard, I don't know what you think our marriage is like, but you haven't said no," Richard interrupted smoothly, setting his empty glass down with a quiet clink. His eyes twinkled with something I couldn't quite name. Confidence? Amusement? Mark fell silent again, and I could feel the tension thickening around us like a fog. I swallowed hard. Why wasn't he shutting this down? Why was there hesitation at all? "Look," Richard continued, his voice gentle but insistent, "I'm not trying to offend anyone. This isn't about disrespecting your marriage, quite the opposite. It's about redefining limits, about seeing if those limits even exist in the first place." My breath felt shallow. The restaurant's soft jazz now sounded distant, almost distorted, as if the entire world had narrowed down to this moment, to this table, to the impossible situation Richard had placed in front of us. Then, just as casually as he had started this conversation, Richard reached into his pocket, pulled out a sleek black card, and slid it across the table toward Mark. "Just think about it," he said. "If curiosity wins out over certainty, you know where to find me." Mark stared at the card, unmoving. I didn't dare look at it. I had heard of men like Richard before, powerful, influential, so accustomed to getting what they wanted that they made the most outrageous suggestions sound perfectly rational. But I had never thought I'd be sitting across from one, let alone be the subject of his interest. I needed air. I needed to get out of there. Pushing my chair back, I stood up abruptly, my pulse hammering. "I think we're done here." Richard didn't look surprised. He just smiled. "Fair enough," he said, raising his hand slightly, as if in surrender. "No pressure, just an idea." Mark finally stirred, shaking himself from whatever daze had taken hold of him. "Yeah, I think we should go," he muttered, shoving the untouched card back toward Richard. I didn't wait. I turned and walked out of the restaurant, barely registering the curious glances of the other diners. The cool night air hit my face like a slap, but it wasn't enough to clear my head. I heard Mark's footsteps behind me. I expected him to be just as shaken, just as horrified by what had happened. But when he finally spoke, his words sent a fresh wave of shock through me. "Do you think he was serious?" I stopped in my tracks, my heart pounding. I turned to face my husband, searching his expression, hoping, praying, that I had misheard him. But the look in his eyes told me I hadn't. And in that moment, I realized something even more shocking than Richard's proposal. Mark wasn't just disturbed by what Richard had suggested. He was considering it. The ride home was painfully silent. Mark's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual, his jaw set, eyes fixed on the road ahead. I sat stiffly in the passenger seat, arms crossed, my mind still reeling from what had just happened. Richard's words echoed in my head. Sometimes keeping a spark alive means stepping outside of what's comfortable. I felt sick. The moment we stepped inside our home, I kicked off my heels and turned to face Mark, my heart hammering. "Tell me you're not actually thinking about this." He exhaled sharply, rubbing the back of his neck. He hesitated. That hesitation sent a chill down my spine. I swallowed hard. "Mark." "I don't know," he admitted, finally meeting my eyes. "It was unexpected." "That's an understatement," I snapped. "It was completely out of line. And the fact that you didn't shut it down immediately." I shook my head, unable to finish the sentence. He sighed, stepping closer. "It caught me off guard, okay. I wasn't expecting it." Neither was I, but I didn't sit there considering it. My voice cracked, the weight of the evening pressing down on me. "What is there to think about, Mark? This isn't us." He looked away for a long moment, then sat down heavily on the couch. "I know," he said quietly. "But I don't know. Maybe he's right about some things." I stared at him, my stomach twisting. "Right about what?" Mark exhaled slowly, rubbing his face with both hands. "We've been married for 23 years, Liz. We love each other, we have a good life. But don't tell me you haven't felt it. The routine. The predictability." He glanced up at me, his expression cautious. "It's not bad, but it's not the same as it used to be." I folded my arms, my pulse racing. "So your solution is this?" "No, that's not what I'm saying," he said quickly. "I don't even know what I'm saying. Richard made me think about things I've never even considered before." I shook my head, my chest tightening. "I can't believe this." Mark ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated. "Liz, I'm not saying I want to do it. He hesitated again. "I just want to understand why the idea bothers me this much." I felt like the ground beneath me was shifting, like I had stepped into some alternate version of my marriage where my husband was entertaining this. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Mark, I don't know what's happening in your head right now, but let me make one thing clear. I'm not interested." He nodded quickly. "I know. And that's enough for me." "Is it?" I challenged. "Because you keep saying you're just thinking, but what if thinking turns into curiosity? And curiosity turns into something else?" Mark exhaled, rubbing his temples. "I love you, Liz. I don't want to lose what we have." "Then don't risk it," I said softly, my voice laced with hurt. "Because even considering it changes things." He looked up at me, something unreadable in his eyes. "I don't want to change us," he murmured. I searched his face, looking for the man I had always trusted. He was still there, but now so was doubt. And for the first time in 23 years, I wasn't sure if love alone would be enough. The next few days were tense, filled with unspoken words and hesitant glances. Mark tried to act normal, making coffee in the morning, asking about my day, but there was a weight between us that neither of us knew how to lift. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Even though Mark had said he wasn't interested, I knew the thought had lingered in his mind longer than it should have. And that alone made me question everything. On Friday evening, I sat alone on the back porch, a glass of wine in hand, watching the sky melt into warm hues of pink and orange. I had spent the entire week replaying that night at Richard's house, dissecting every moment, every glance, every pause. Mark finally stepped outside, hesitating before sitting beside me. "You've been quiet," he said. I exhaled slowly. "I've been thinking." He nodded, waiting. I turned to face him. "Mark, I need to know. Why did you hesitate that night? Why didn't you shut it down immediately?" He looked away, gripping his hands together. "I told you. I was caught off guard." "That's not the whole truth," I pressed. "You thought about it." He swallowed hard, then met my gaze. "Yeah, I did." The admission hit me like a punch to the gut, even though I already knew it. "I don't know why," he continued. "Maybe it was the way Richard framed it, like it was something normal. Something couples do when they've been together as long as we have. And for a split second, I wondered, is there something we're missing?" I set my glass down, folding my arms. "And now," Mark exhaled, "now I know that's not who we are. That's not what I want." He hesitated before reaching for my hand. "Liz, I don't want to lose what we have. But I don't want us to get stuck, either." I studied his face, looking for sincerity, for regret, for the man I had built a life with. "Then we fix us," I said softly. "Not by listening to men like Richard, but by remembering who we are, by choosing each other every single day." Mark's grip on my hand tightened. "I do choose you." For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. I leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder. "Let's never let anyone else define what our marriage should be." He kissed the top of my head. "Agreed." The evening stretched on, the tension finally giving way to something softer, something familiar. We sat there in silence, the weight of the past week finally lifting. Richard had planted a seed of doubt, but in the end, it only reminded us of what truly mattered: each other.